I never believed in ghosts. Truck driving had always been about the road, the miles, and the cash at the end of it all. I'd seen weird things, sure strange figures in the mist, odd lights on the horizon, but I'd always put it down to exhaustion or just road madness. But that night on Old Route 66 changed everything. It was just past midnight when I started feeling the drowsiness settle in. The road was empty, long stretches of asphalt illuminated by my high beams, and the soft hum of the engine was almost lulling me to sleep. I still had a long way to go, so I flicked on the radio to shake myself awake. Static. I fiddled with the knobs, but it was all the same. Odd, I thought, but then again, I was in the middle of nowhere. I rolled down the window to let in some cool night air, hoping it'd keep me awake. The wind smelled strange, like burning rubber mixed with rotting wood. It wasn't the usual smell of the highway, and it made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. Just then, I noticed something in my rearview mirror, a pair of headlights, distant but closing in fast. I hadn't seen a car for miles, so it seemed odd to suddenly have someone right on my tail. The lights were unusually bright, almost blinding, and they followed me closely, matching my speed exactly. At first, I figured it was just a reckless driver, so I kept my focus ahead. But then I noticed something peculiar. The lights behind me weren't just headlights, they were somehow floating. They didn't bounce or waver like normal lights would on a bumpy road. They were steady, like two glowing eyes, fixated on my truck. An uneasy feeling crept into my stomach, but I kept my cool. I decided to slow down a bit and let the car pass, but when I glanced back, the lights were gone. I laughed it off as fatigue playing tricks on me and continued down the road. Then I heard a scraping sound, like nails dragging along the side of my truck. The sound sent shivers down my spine. I gripped the wheel tightly, trying to convince myself it was just a branch or debris. But deep down, I knew it was something else. Out of nowhere, my engine started sputtering. The headlights flickered, and my radio crackled back to life, blasting a loud, distorted voice. I quickly turned it off, but then it turned back on, louder this time. The voice was garbled, but I could make out some words. Turn. Around. Stop. Now. I felt trapped, unsure whether to keep driving or pull over. I tried pressing the gas, but my truck slowed down as if something were holding it back. And that's when I saw a figure standing in the middle of the road. I slammed on the brakes, and the truck skidded to a stop, throwing me forward. The figure was still there, a shadowy silhouette that seemed to be staring straight at me. Its face was obscured, but I could feel its gaze piercing through the windshield. I honked, but it didn't move. My heart raced, every instinct screaming at me to get out of there, but I was frozen. Then, without warning, the figure vanished, as if it had never been there. I sat there, breathing heavily, trying to make sense of what just happened. The road was empty again, silent, but that eerie smell lingered in the air. I started the truck and pressed the gas. I just wanted to get as far away from that spot as possible. But as I drove, I noticed something else. The truck's interior had grown cold, like I'd stepped into a freezer. My breath was visible, fogging up the window. The radio crackled to life again, this time playing an old, haunting tune, a song I recognized from my childhood. It was a lullaby Mother used to sing, but it sounded distorted, sinister. And then in the passenger seat I saw a shadow. I whipped my head around, but there was nothing there. I shook it off, telling myself I was just tired, but a faint whisper filled the cab. It was a child's voice, soft but chilling. "Why did you leave me?" The voice sent a jolt through me. I hadn't thought of my sister in years. She had died young, in a car accident when I was a teenager. I hadn't been there. I'd been too busy hanging out with friends, too selfish to go along with her that day. And here, on this haunted road, that guilt came rushing back. As I drove, the whisper grew louder, turning into cries, then screams. It was like she was right there, reliving her pain. The air grew thick, and I could feel her presence beside me, an icy hand resting on my shoulder. I pressed the pedal harder, desperate to outrun the haunting memories, but the truck wouldn't go faster. The engine groaned and the headlights flickered again, barely illuminating the road. And then, in the dim light, I saw her, a pale, ghostly figure of my sister standing right in front of the truck. This time I couldn't stop in time. The truck plowed through the figure, and I heard a sickening thud. My heart pounded as I pulled over, my hands shaking. I had to know if it was real, if she was really there. But as I stepped out of the cab, the road was empty. Nothing but darkness and silence stretched around me. I leaned against the truck, trying to catch my breath, when I felt something grab my ankle. I looked down, and there she was, her cold, dead eyes staring up at me, her grip tightening. I screamed, scrambling to free myself, but her voice echoed in my mind, "You left me. You left me." I don't remember how I got back into the truck, but I was driving again, pushing the truck faster and faster, hoping to escape her. The whispers faded, but the chill remained, seeping into my bones. Finally, the road signs indicated I was nearing a town. The lights of a gas station appeared up ahead, and I pulled in, desperate for warmth, for people, for anything normal. I stumbled into the station, the bright lights blinding me momentarily. The clerk looked at me with a mix of concern and suspicion as I babbled incoherently, trying to explain what had happened. After a moment, he sighed and shook his head. "Old Route 66 has seen its fair share of ghosts," he said. "People see things. People who've got unfinished business." I wanted to tell him he was crazy, that it was just my imagination, but I couldn't shake the feeling that my sister's spirit was still with me, haunting me, reminding me of what I'd left behind. To this day, every time I get behind the wheel, I feel her presence. And every time I drive down a dark, empty road, I wonder if she'll come back. I wonder if I'll ever be free from the haunting memory of that ride down Old Route 66. The gas station clerk watched me with an odd sympathy as I stood there, catching my breath. I wanted to tell him everything about the haunting voice on the radio, the figure in the road, and that horrible, icy grip, but I could barely get a word out. My mind kept replaying that moment when I saw her face, her dead eyes filled with anger and pain. He handed me a bottle of water, and as I took it, he spoke in a low, cautious voice. "You're not the first to come through here with a story like that," he said, glancing at the road I'd just come from. "That highway has a history, and sometimes the past doesn't stay buried." "What do you mean?" I asked, still feeling a shiver that had nothing to do with the cold. He leaned over the counter. "There's a legend about that stretch of road. People say it's a place where regrets come back to haunt you. Drivers, just like you, have seen things. People they've lost, people they've wronged. But some say it's worse if you ignore them." His eyes narrowed, and he hesitated before adding, "You should probably go back and make peace." I felt a chill run down my spine at his words. Go back? Every nerve in my body screamed against it. There was no way I was setting foot on that road again, let alone looking for the ghost of my dead sister. Yet somehow, deep down, I knew he was right. I'd left things unfinished. I thanked the clerk, my voice barely a whisper, and returned to my truck, my mind racing. I had two choices: keep running or go back and face whatever was haunting me. A strange determination settled over me, and before I knew it, I was back in the driver's seat, turning the truck around. As soon as I got back on Old Route 66, the familiar dread crept in, wrapping around me like a heavy blanket. The road stretched ahead, dark and empty. I drove slowly, my eyes scanning the sides of the road, waiting, dreading what I might see. The temperature in the cab began to drop again. I could see my breath, each puff of air hanging heavy and cold. And then, the static returned, crackling through the radio. I didn't touch it this time, letting the sounds wash over me. The static grew louder, morphing into a faint melody. It was the lullaby again, but this time it was clearer. My mother's voice soft, soothing, the way it had been before everything went wrong. And then, I heard her. "Why did you leave me?" the voice echoed through the truck, filling the cab. It was my sister, the same words, but there was something different about her tone. This time it sounded less angry, more hurt. I gripped the wheel tightly, my throat closing up as memories flooded back, her small hand reaching for mine, her laughter, her trust. And then the day I wasn't there. Tears blurred my vision as I whispered into the cold, "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to leave you. I was young, and I didn't understand. I should have been there." The silence that followed was thick and heavy. For a moment I thought she'd gone. But then there was a gentle touch on my shoulder, a warmth that was somehow familiar. I didn't look back, but I felt her presence, calm and comforting. And in the silence I heard her whisper, "I forgive you." A sense of peace washed over me, lifting the weight I'd carried for years. The cold in the cab faded, replaced by a soft warmth. My grip on the wheel loosened, and the truck moved forward smoothly, the road stretching out like a path to somewhere brighter. Just as I thought it was over, my headlights caught something on the side of the road. My heart skipped a beat, and I braced myself for the worst. But instead of a ghostly figure, I saw a small, white cross the kind people put up in memory of lost loved ones. I hadn't noticed it before, but there it was, glinting softly in the moonlight. I stopped the truck and got out, my footsteps heavy as I approached the cross. There was a name etched into the wood, barely visible in the dim light. My sister's name. I knelt beside it, feeling the weight of years of guilt and grief come pouring out. "I'm so sorry," I whispered. "I should have come here sooner." The wind picked up, swirling around me in a soft embrace, almost like an answer. I closed my eyes, feeling a peace I hadn't felt in years, and when I opened them, I swore I saw her, a faint figure in the distance, smiling at me, whole and happy. I don't remember how long I stayed there, but eventually, I made my way back to the truck. The drive back was quiet, peaceful. The radio was silent, the cab warm, and I felt lighter than I had in years. When I got back to the gas station, the clerk was waiting outside, leaning against the door. "You look different," he said with a nod, like he knew exactly what I'd been through. I didn't know what to say, so I just gave him a small nod back and climbed into my truck. As I pulled away from the gas station, I glanced in the rearview mirror one last time. There was no sign of the headlights, no figures in the darkness, just the open road stretching out ahead. I drove into the dawn, leaving old Route 66 and the ghosts of my past behind. But every now and then I still feel a faint touch on my shoulder, a reminder of the night I found peace on that haunted highway. And I know, wherever she is, my sister has found peace too.